Tampa Bay's silent catastrophe is already in motion, and most of the 3 million people living inside it have no idea. Picture this. It is the middle of the night. The storm that meteorologists have been quietly dreading for decades finally locks onto Tampa Bay. Not a graze, not a near miss, a direct hit. Within hours, a 22-foot wall of water, taller than a 2-story house, is moving inland at the speed of a freight train. There is no outrunning it. The roads are already gone. The bridges are already underwater. And the city that had more than a century of warnings is completely, catastrophically unprepared. Here is what makes this different from every other hurricane story you have heard. Scientists do not say Tampa Bay might get hit. They say Tampa Bay is the single most vulnerable major city in the entire United States. The geography practically guarantees it. And yet, construction on the waterfront is booming. Billions of dollars in new buildings are going up right inside the danger zone. Right now. Today. So why is one of America's fastest growing cities building toward a disaster it already knows is coming? Tampa Bay looks like paradise. Warm water, stunning sunsets, miles of coastline that draw millions of people every year. But underneath that picture-perfect surface is a geographic trap, one that has been quietly tightening for over a century. Start with the shape of the bay itself. Tampa Bay is not wide and open like the Gulf of Mexico. It is narrow, funnel-shaped, like a giant natural bowl with one end pointed directly at the sea. When a hurricane pushes water toward that opening, the bay does not absorb it. It concentrates it. The water has nowhere to go but forward and inward, accelerating as it squeezes into that funnel until it hits land with a force that flattens everything in its path. Then there is the depth, or rather the lack of it. Tampa Bay averages just 12 feet deep. That sounds like a lot until you understand what it means during a storm surge. Deep water absorbs surge energy. Shallow water does not. It transfers that energy directly onto the shore. Picture filling a shallow dinner plate with water and then tipping it slightly. Every drop spills instantly. That is Tampa Bay in a hurricane. The land itself makes it worse. Large portions of the Tampa Bay metropolitan area sit at or near sea level, not slightly above it. At it. Entire neighborhoods are built on terrain that barely clears the waterline on a calm day. Add 12 feet of storm surge. Add another 10 feet on top of that for a major storm. Then ask yourself where that water goes. The answer is everywhere. In 2010, Tampa Bay's own planning council ran the numbers. The simulation was called Project Phoenix, and the results were staggering. A single Category 5 hurricane hitting Tampa Bay could destroy nearly 500,000 buildings, pile up 41 million tons of debris, and kill more than 2,000 people. And that was 15 years ago, before the population exploded, before billions more in waterfront development, before sea levels crept even higher. Today, NOAA models project that a worst-case storm could destroy up to 1.5 million buildings and cause $175 billion in damage. To put that in scale, that is more than the entire annual GDP of most countries wiped out in a single storm. And it gets worse. The bridges connecting Tampa's hospitals to the mainland, the routes emergency crews would need to save lives, are projected to flood and become impassable. Tampa General Hospital, sitting on Davis Island surrounded by water, could be completely cut off. The geography didn't create a city at risk. It created a city that was always one storm away from disappearing. But here's what nobody told you. The geography is only half the problem. The last time a major hurricane made direct landfall on Tampa Bay was 1921. Let that sink in. Over 100 years ago. Before commercial aviation, before television, before the interstate highway system existed. The city of Tampa in 1921 had a population of roughly 50,000 people, small enough that a catastrophic storm, while devastating, was survivable at scale. Today, more than 3 million people live in the Tampa Bay metro area. The city that took that hit a century ago and the city sitting in the crosshairs today are not even the same place in any meaningful way. But here is the dangerous part. The storm stopped. The city survived. And somewhere in the collective memory of Tampa Bay, that survival became a story people told themselves for generations. Tampa does not get hit. We have always been fine. It always turns somewhere else. That is not meteorology. That is mythology. Scientists have a name for what repeated close calls do to human psychology. Near-miss bias. When something almost happens but does not, the brain does not register it as danger narrowly avoided. It registers it as proof of safety. Every hurricane that wobbled north at the last second, every storm that weakened before landfall, every season that passed without a direct hit, each one quietly reinforced the illusion. Not that Tampa was lucky, that Tampa was protected. Mark Luther has watched this play out in real time. He is a professor of marine science living in St. Petersburg, and he tracks the slow creep of bayou water as it inches closer to his low-lying neighborhood year after year. He knows exactly what a major hurricane moving directly up Tampa Bay would do to his house, his street, his entire community. He says it plainly. A storm in the right direction could completely cover his home and most of the homes around him. He still lives there. Because what else do you do with knowledge that feels too large to act on? The real estate industry never had that crisis of conscience. Developers looked at Tampa's century of near misses and saw opportunity, not warning. Beachfront lots, waterfront condominiums, luxury towers with unobstructed bay views. The building boom that followed was not built on solid risk assessment. It was built on 100 years of luck being quietly mistaken for 100 years of safety. Meanwhile, the oldest parts of Tampa were constructed in an era when sea level rise was not even a concept engineers considered. Infrastructure, designed for a world that no longer exists, now shelters millions of people in a climate that is becoming something entirely new. 100 years of silence from the storm. But here's what nobody told you. That silence was never a promise. Close your eyes and picture it. Not as an abstract disaster scenario, as a real day. The National Hurricane Center issues the update at 2 in the morning. The storm has locked its track. It is moving directly up Tampa Bay. Forecasters project landfall in 18 hours. The surge forecast reads 22 feet, and the evacuation order, the one that tells 3 million people to leave, goes out in the middle of the night when most of Tampa is asleep. 18 hours sounds like enough time. It is not. Traffic models for a full Tampa Bay evacuation show that gridlock sets in within the first 2 hours. The highways leading out of the city, Interstate 75, Interstate 4, and US Route 19, become parking lots as millions of people attempt to leave simultaneously. Studies have shown that a complete evacuation of Tampa Bay's surge zones cannot be accomplished within a standard warning window. The math simply does not work. The roads were not built for it. The geography does not allow it. Then the surge arrives. Not slowly, not like a rising tide you can watch from a safe distance. Storm surge moves like a wall, fast, silent in the moments before it hits, and then completely overwhelming. 22 feet of water is not something you wade through. It is not something you escape by moving to your second floor. 22 feet puts the rooftop of a standard 2-story house underwater. It buries road signs. It swallows traffic lights. It erases entire neighborhoods in minutes. The wind is terrifying, but the water is what kills. Historically, storm surge accounts for nearly half of all hurricane-related deaths in the United States. Not the wind, not the rain. The water that nobody outran because they waited too long, or had nowhere to go, or simply did not believe it would be that bad. Tampa General Hospital sits on Davis Islands, connected to the mainland by bridges that NOAA projects will flood and fail during a major storm. The city's primary trauma center, serving the region's most critically ill patients, becomes an island. Backup generators kick in. Fuel supplies are finite. Relief crews cannot reach it. The hospital that people would be rushing toward in a mass casualty event is precisely the facility that a major hurricane would cut off first. Power substations built at sea level fail within hours. The grid goes dark across the region. Cell towers follow. Emergency communications buckle. The 911 system, already overwhelmed, goes silent in the hardest hit zones. Not disrupted, not strained. Silent. The scenario is not speculation. It is the output of NOAA models, FEMA planning documents, and decade after decade of emergency management simulations. The disaster has been mapped in extraordinary detail. But here's what nobody told you. Knowing exactly how it happens has not stopped anyone from pretending it won't. The evacuation maps look clean and organized on paper. Color-coded zones, clear boundaries, logical routes to higher ground. What those maps do not show is who actually lives inside them, and why, for tens of thousands of Tampa Bay residents, the instruction to simply leave is not an instruction at all. It is a cruel joke. Jessica Lopez lives in what Hillsborough County officially designates an emergency management hotspot. Her home is a mobile home. It floods during tropical storms, not hurricanes. Tropical storms, the weather events that do not even make the front page. Last summer, during one of those routine storms, the septic tank in her backyard overflowed. She was 6 months pregnant. The yard was covered in waste. She could not go outside. She could not leave. She stayed because she had no choice. In a Category 3 hurricane, NOAA models show her neighborhood goes completely underwater. She knows this, and she is still there. Because leaving costs money that she does not have. Evacuation means gas, hotels, food, days away from a job that does not offer paid emergency leave. For Jessica, and thousands of families like her across Tampa Bay, the financial barrier to evacuation is as impassable as any flooded road. The evacuation zone is not a boundary on a map for these families. It is the place they are permanently trapped in. Mobile homes offer almost no structural protection, even in a weak storm. In a direct Category 5 hit, they do not shelter people. They become debris. And Tampa Bay has one of the highest concentrations of mobile home communities in the state of Florida, many of them sitting directly inside the highest risk surge zones. Then there is the elderly population. Tampa Bay has one of the oldest demographic profiles of any major metro area in the United States. There are hundreds of thousands of senior residents who depend on medical equipment, who cannot drive, and who require assistance to evacuate. Many live in communities where organized evacuation support is underfunded and understaffed. During Hurricane Katrina, the deaths were not distributed randomly across the population. They were concentrated precisely among the elderly, the poor, and the immobile. The people every evacuation plan quietly assumes someone else will handle. No one is handling it. When the storm comes, the people with cars, money, and flexibility will leave. The people without those things will stay. And the surge does not check your bank account before it arrives. Every subscriber here is automatically entered in our monthly branded hoodie giveaway, because this community shows up for the stories that matter. Details are in the description. But here's what nobody told you. The people most certain to be left behind are the people the city has already left behind every other day of the year. Here is something that should stop you cold. Tampa Bay knows. Not suspects, not worries, knows. The studies exist. The simulations have been run. The surge maps are published and publicly available. City planners, emergency managers, and elected officials have sat in rooms and reviewed data showing exactly what a direct hurricane strike would do to this city. The knowledge is not the problem. What happened next is, while scientists were warning and models were projecting and emergency managers were running evacuation simulations that consistently failed on paper, Tampa's waterfront was being transformed into one of the most aggressively developed urban coastlines in America. New sports facilities, luxury condominium towers with unobstructed bay views marketed as the ultimate Florida lifestyle, commercial developments stretching right to the water's edge, built on land that surge maps color in the deepest, most dangerous red. The development did not happen in spite of the warnings. It happened alongside them, simultaneously, in full view of everyone who was supposed to be paying attention. Maya Burke sits on Tampa Bay's Planning Council. She does not deny the risk. She says complacency about climate change is hard to overcome because the danger does not feel urgent in the everyday sense that drives human decision-making. There might be a tendency, she says, to put it off and think we can act later. But the financial industry has already decided there is no later. Major insurance companies have been quietly retreating from Florida for years. Not because the storms haven't arrived yet, because the actuarial math on what is coming has already been calculated, and the numbers do not work. State Farm, Allstate, and several other major carriers have reduced or entirely pulled their Florida residential coverage. The insurers who remain have raised premiums to levels that are pricing working families out of coverage entirely. The private market is sending a signal in the clearest language it knows. This risk is no longer insurable at a price people can afford. The market is panicking. The city is building. That paradox is not accidental. Property tax revenues from Waterfront Development Fund, city operations. Tourism tied to that coastline drives the local economy. The political incentive to keep building is enormous. The political cost of restricting development in a surge zone, telling landowners their property cannot be developed, telling investors their projects cannot proceed, is one that almost no elected official in Tampa Bay has been willing to pay. So the towers go up, the tourism campaigns run, the waterfront fills in, and every new building that rises inside the surge zone is one more structure that will need to be rescued, rebuilt, or written off when the storm finally arrives. But here's what nobody told you. The city is not ignoring the risk. It is pricing it onto everyone else. Everything described so far assumes the storm Tampa Bay is dreading behaves like the storms of the past. It will not. The Gulf of Mexico is running a fever. Sea surface temperatures across the Gulf have shattered records in recent years, reaching levels that climate scientists describe not as a warm cycle, but as a fundamental shift in the ocean's baseline. And that distinction matters enormously, because hurricanes do not run on wind. They run on heat. Warm water is the fuel. The warmer the water, the stronger the storm, the faster it intensifies, and the more moisture it carries onto land when it finally hits. What that means for Tampa Bay is not abstract. It is arithmetic. A hurricane forming over the Gulf today has access to more energy than the same storm would have had 30 years ago. Scientists have documented a dramatic increase in what they call rapid intensification, storms that jump from Category 1 to Category 4 in less than 24 hours. That compression of intensity into a shorter window is not just alarming on a meteorological chart. It is catastrophic for evacuation planning. Tampa Bay's evacuation models already struggle with an 18-hour window. Rapid intensification can cut that window in half. A storm that looks manageable on Tuesday morning can be unsurvivable by Tuesday night. Sea level rise compounds every number in the equation. Tampa Bay's water level has already risen measurably compared to just decades ago. That baseline rise means storm surge does not start from zero anymore. It starts from higher. A surge that would have reached 10 feet above ground in 1970 reaches 12 feet today with the same storm. By mid-century, under moderate climate projections, that number climbs further still. The surge zone expands. More homes fall inside it. More people are at risk. And the storms delivering that surge are getting stronger at the same time the land they are hitting is getting lower. Climate models that once projected these conditions for the distant future keep getting revised. Not forward, backward. Events that were forecast for 2060 are arriving in 2024. The acceleration is outpacing the predictions, and the predictions were already frightening. The Gulf is not returning to the temperatures of the 20th century. The storms forming over it are not going to weaken back to historical averages. The trajectory is set. The only variable left is timing. Which storm, which season, which year finally runs that track directly up Tampa Bay's funnel-shaped coast with a fully loaded surge behind it. Not if, not maybe. When. But here's what nobody told you. The question of when has a more uncomfortable answer than most people in Tampa Bay are ready to hear. Florida has updated its evacuation zones. Officials will tell you the system has improved, and compared to 20 years ago, they are not wrong. The warning technology is better. The surge modeling is more precise. The public communication infrastructure is more developed. On paper, Tampa Bay's emergency preparedness looks like progress. Then you look at what the simulations actually show when they run a full evacuation drill. Not a success, not even close. Emergency management exercises conducted across Tampa Bay have consistently produced the same result. A complete evacuation of the highest risk surge zones within the window a major hurricane provides is logistically impossible with the current road network, the current population density, and the current rate of public compliance. People leave too late. Roads saturate too fast. The most vulnerable residents, the ones without cars, without money, without anywhere to go, do not move at all. The simulation ends the same way every time, with people still inside the surge zone when the water arrives. Officials know this. The reports are not classified. They are publicly available documents sitting in county emergency management databases that almost nobody reads. Tampa Bay has invested in early warning systems, and those investments are real. The National Hurricane Center's track forecasting has improved dramatically over the past 2 decades. Surge prediction models are more accurate than they have ever been, but a perfect warning delivered to someone with no ability to act on it is not a solution. It is just better documentation of a preventable tragedy. The structural fixes that would actually move the needle, restricting new development inside surge zones, funding organized evacuation support for residents without vehicles, retrofitting critical infrastructure like power substations away from sea level, hardening the bridge access to Tampa General Hospital, remain largely underfunded, politically stalled, or simply unstarted. Maya Burke and planners like her keep making the case. The time to act is now, not after the storm. Now. Retrofitting after a catastrophe costs 10 times what prevention costs before one. Mark Luther walks out every morning to get his paper. He sees the dolphins moving through the bayou. He watches the roseate spoonbills picking along the water's edge. He says it himself. The beauty of the place makes you forget. Makes you set aside the knowledge of what one storm on one particular track would do to everything he sees from that front step. That is not denial. That is what it looks like to live inside an impossible situation and still choose to be present in it. But the storm does not care about the dolphins. It does not care about the beauty. It does not negotiate with the life people have built here. It is simply coming. And Tampa Bay is simply not ready. Tampa Bay is not a story about one city making one bad decision. It is a story about what happens when human beings are very good at living in the present and very bad at preparing for a future they can see coming but cannot quite make themselves believe in. Tampa Bay has the studies, it has the models, it has the scientists, the planners, the emergency managers, and the surge maps. It has a planning council member sitting in meetings telling elected officials that the time to act is now. It has a marine science professor watching the water rise in his backyard year after year. It has families like Jessica Lopez, already flooding in tropical storms, already trapped, already knowing that a major hurricane would end everything they have. The information is not missing. The will to act on it is. And Tampa Bay is not alone in that failure. It is simply the most extreme version of it. Coastal cities across the United States are making the same calculation, quietly and continuously, that the cost of preparing today is too visible, too politically difficult, too economically disruptive, while the cost of the disaster remains comfortably abstract, something that will happen eventually, to someone, in some future that never quite arrives until suddenly it does. The storms are not waiting for the politics to resolve. The Gulf is warming. The storms are intensifying faster than the models predicted. The surge zones are expanding as the baseline water level climbs. Every season that passes without a direct hit on Tampa Bay is not evidence that the risk was overstated. It is one fewer season standing between 3 million people and the moment their luck finally runs out. Mark Luther still walks out every morning. He still watches the dolphins. He still lives inside the beauty of a place he knows is borrowed time. Jessica Lopez is still in her mobile home inside the surge zone, still one tropical storm away from a flooded yard, still unable to leave. The waterfront towers are still going up. The insurance companies are still pulling out. The evacuation simulations are still failing on paper. Nothing has changed, and everything is changing, faster than the forecasts said it would. If this story reminded you that disasters do not wait for convenient timing, grab your free disaster preparedness toolkit. The link is in the description. Because the gap between a warning and a plan is exactly where lives are lost. Tampa Bay's silent catastrophe is not coming. It is already in motion, in the rising water, in the inadequate roads, in the families who have nowhere to go. The only question left is whether the storm arrives before the city finally decides to take it seriously.